I was exploring the map, as I often do, and I found this fence blocking a beach close to my home. And I was wondering, what do they have to hide there that they're even blocking the beach? Turns out this is a munitions factory for Denel Dynamics, and it's considered a national key point. This led me to explore the whole concept of national key points. What are these locations? In South Africa, national key points, or NKPs, are sites that are considered vital to the country's national security, economy, or public safety. These can include infrastructure like power stations, communication hubs, fuel depots, and certain government buildings. The concept of national key points was originally established under the National Key Points Act of 1980 during the apartheid era, and the purpose of this was to protect critical infrastructure from sabotage, espionage, or attack. The owners of these NKPs, whether they were public or private, mostly government-owned, were required to implement these drastic security measures at their own cost. But like I said, most of these were government-owned, so the government would pay to secure these facilities. Now, there has been some controversy around these key points. The legislation has been criticized for its secrecy and for being somewhat outdated, as it was used to justify limiting public access to or information about these specific locations. I mean, you can imagine how this was used during apartheid to stop people from being allowed to know about things or maintain access to certain facilities. This was so secret that the list of national key points only came out in 2015 after a long court case. That's 20 years after the apartheid regime fell. The National Key Points Act has been used in various ways, for example, to stop people from taking photos of certain places, such as former President Jacob Zuma's Nkandla homestead. Moving forward, there have been efforts to replace the 1980s Act with a more transparent and democratic legislation. A proposed Critical Infrastructure Protection Bill was introduced to improve oversight and align security laws with the Constitution. That bill has since become law as the Critical Infrastructure Protection Act of 2019. Interestingly enough though, I can't actually find a list of critical infrastructure listed under this new act. And I have searched quite thoroughly for it. And in the Act, it's listed that you could find this on the SAP's website, which I can't seem to find. And it's been 6 years since this Act came into being. So it begs the question, has this all become a bit of a secret again? Will the government use these key points to curb the right of free speech, movement, etc.? Anyway, besides all that, I found the subject quite interesting, and I thought I'd quickly go into a list of all the national key points that were listed in 2015. Yes, I know this is slightly outdated because 2015 was 10 years ago, but I can't find any more recent information, so this is what I found. The first category of national key points is transportation, and the 3 main airports are listed. That's OR Tambo in Johannesburg, King Shaka in Durban, and the Cape Town Airport in Cape Town. Durban bulk shipping is also listed. Notably, Bloemfontein, George, and other small airports aren't considered key points. Neither is the V&A Harbour in Cape Town. Each province of South Africa's legislature building is considered a national key point, as well as Parliament, the Union buildings, the President's office, and 120 Plain Street in Cape Town. Some homes of current and past presidents seem to also be national key points, such as Mandela's Qunu village home, Mbeki's home, Jacob Zuma's Nkandla, the President's state homes in Cape Town, Pretoria, and Durban, the President's private home in Joburg, as well as former President F.W. de Klerk's home in Sea Point, but I'm not sure if that's still the case since he has passed away. The next category is all the science-related locations and includes the Square Kilometre Array in Northern Cape, which is the telescope. It also includes the South African National Space Agency, didn't even know we had one, as well as the Onderstepoort Biological Products, which sounds very ominous, the CSIR Wind Tunnel, Hartbeespoort Earth Station, and NEXA, which is the South African Nuclear Energy Corporation, which I guess is probably a good building to be protected. In terms of IT and printing, we have the ID Printing Factory, various CETA buildings, the Government Printing Works, and the Office of Interception Centre. which also sounds a bit ominous, but is supposedly a division within South Africa's State Security Agency, or SSA, which is responsible for coordinating and managing the lawful interception of communications for national security and law enforcement purposes, whatever that is. In terms of electricity, all of the power stations are key points, as well as some of the bigger distribution and transmission stations and the National Control Center in Simapan, which is in Gauteng. One of the biggest categories is fuel and oil, and I guess these are quite important to the running of a country. All of the main petrol companies' depots are key points. A lot of Durban Harbour buildings are also considered key points, as well as Transnet pipelines and pumping stations. The refineries of the fuel companies are also key points, and one of the more interesting key points are the 2 single buoy mooring stations, which are out in the open ocean. These are pretty cool because fuel tankers come and moor to these stations, and then there's a pipeline from these stations to the mainland, which I think is pretty cool. The SFF oil jetty and storage facility are also included as national key points. In terms of telecommunications, most of SABC's buildings in the bigger towns and cities are key points, as well as the South African Post Office Computer Center and Centec Tower and the Centec Transmission Center. In terms of banking, all the South African Reserve Bank branches are key points, as well as the South African Banknote Company, which I've made a video about, and the South African Mint. What I've found quite interesting is that when it comes to defense, none of the South African National Defence Force properties or Air Force bases are actually considered key points. It's more the companies that produce weapons and munition that are covered. So most of Denel's buildings, as well as African Explosives, BAE Systems, Acacia Operations Services, which I think is related to defense, but it's also a bit vague, and the SSA Communication Center is also a national key point. Most of the protected water infrastructure appears to be in Gauteng. All of Rand Water's pumping stations are key points, and the Vaal Dam is a key point. In the rest of the country, some of the other bigger pumping stations are also listed. There's only one mining company listed, which is ArcelorMittal, and one chemical company listed, which is NKPS Chlorochem. That's all the national key points as listed in 2015. I don't know that these are still considered the critical infrastructure. It's probably quite likely. And if you did try to break into these locations, you would face extra security and the full might of the law. So I wouldn't recommend trying to get in. Let me know if any of these locations surprised you and what your thoughts are when thinking of national key points. Personally, I think it's quite important that critical infrastructure is kept secure to prevent terrorism and anarchy, but I also think transparency is important, and that's why I like making videos like this, so we can all know things. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and stay tuned for the next one. Cheers, bye!